Okay, we've all been there, right? You know that feeling when you've got like a deadline looming
Oh, yeah.
and that cursor is just blinking at you on this blank page?
Yep.
And suddenly you just feel this like an overwhelming urge to like reorganize your sock drawer instead.
Oh, totally, totally.
Procrastination, let's face it, it's something we all struggle with.
It really is.
But what if I told you that putting things off, that could be like directly affecting how happy you are?
Hmm. Interesting.
In this deep dive, we're going to dig into that and see what that connection is all about, and hopefully give you some strategies to break free from procrastination.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would be interested in that for sure.
And we're not just talking about, making to-do lists and that sort of thing.
Right. We need to go a bit deeper than that, right? We need to look beyond those surface level tips and tricks. It's not just about productivity hacks. It's more about, understanding what's really going on in our minds. Like, what are those like psychological things, those mechanisms that make us choose comfort in the moment over that long-term satisfaction?
Interesting.
Yeah. So that's what I find really fascinating about this whole topic.
Okay, so it sounds like we're not going for a generic self-help kind of pep talk here.
Yeah, exactly.
But before we get into all the details, I think it's worth like figuring out what we even mean when we say procrastination.
Yeah.
Because is it just like being lazy, or is it bad time management? Or is there something more to it?
I think it's definitely, it's more than just laziness.
Okay.
Procrastination is about choosing that instant gratification, even when, like deep down, it's probably going to lead to some not so good consequences down the line.
Right.
It's that inner battle between what you know you should be doing and what just feels good right now.
Yeah.
It's like, think about it.
Okay.
You've got your prefrontal cortex. That's the part of your brain that's all about planning and making decisions.
Uh-huh.
That part's telling you, hey, you should be working on that presentation.
Right.
But then you have your limbic system.
Oh, yeah.
That's your emotional center. And that one chimes in with, ooh, but scrolling through social media sounds way more fun right now.
Uh-huh.
And let's be honest, a lot of the time, that limbic system, it wins.
Yeah, I think you're right. It does seem like it wins more often than not.
Right.
So it's this like constant back and forth in our brains. And unfortunately that, the instant gratification side seems to have a pretty strong hold.
Yeah, it does.
But you mentioned that there are like negative consequences to just giving in.
Yeah.
Is it really all that bad? I mean, come on. We all need a break sometimes, don't we?
Oh, for sure. Rest and relaxation, those are crucial.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to be able to tell the difference between actually taking a break and just straight up procrastinating.
Okay.
When you really rest, you come back feeling refreshed and ready to get things done.
Yeah.
But when you procrastinate, you end up feeling drained and guilty, maybe even more stressed than before.
Right. Yeah.
So it's not quite the same.
Okay. So it's not just about the work you don't get done. It's that emotional stuff that comes along with it.
Yeah, it's the whole package.
I know when I procrastinate, I end up feeling pretty bad about myself.
Yeah, I get that.
But I'm still not quite clear on how that all ties into happiness.
Well, okay, picture this. You've got this huge project.
Okay.
It's due next week.
Uh-huh.
And every single day that you put it off, that unfinished task, it just gets heavier and heavier.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the stress and anxiety building up. It's like a dark cloud just hanging over your head.
Oh, I can like feel that tension just thinking about it.
Right.
It's more than just stress, though, isn't it? There's also that feeling of guilt.
Exactly, yeah.
Like you just feel bad about it.
Procrastination, it often leads to shame.
Mm-hmm.
We start to question ourselves like, why can't I just get this done? And it starts to chip away at your self-esteem,
Yeah.
And the worst part, it's not just work stuff that triggers this whole cycle. It can creep into your personal life, too. You might end up putting off things that could actually bring you real joy.
So it's like we're sabotaging ourselves in like every area of our lives.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so we've established that procrastination is not good for happiness.
It's a real happiness killer.
But before we get to solutions, I'm really curious about the why.
Yeah, the big question.
Why do we do this to ourselves? Why choose the path of stress and guilt? Is it just a lack of willpower?
It's rarely that straightforward,
Okay.
There's usually some deeper stuff going on, some psychological stuff.
Right.
One major thing is the fear of failure. We get so worried about not meeting expectations, so we just avoid even starting.
Oh, so it's like we're saying, if I don't try, then I can't fail.
Exactly. It's like a self-protection mechanism.
So procrastination becomes like a shield to protect our egos.
Yeah, you could see it that way.
Okay, interesting.
And then there's perfectionism,
Yeah.
which can be just as paralyzing.
Oh, absolutely.
When you believe everything has to be flawless, the pressure, it can just be too much.
Right?
It's like you're staring at a blank canvas,
Uh-huh.
too afraid to make the first brush stroke, because what if it's not perfect?
Yeah, you're frozen.
Right, exactly.
I can see how both of those things can definitely lead to procrastination.
Yeah, they're big contributors.
But I think sometimes it's also just a lack of motivation, plain and simple.
Yeah, that's fair.
Some tasks are just boring,
Or
or tedious.
it's true.
And it's so easy to get distracted by things that are more fun,
Oh, yeah, especially these days.
like checking social media or watching those funny cat videos.
exactly.
They give you that instant gratification.
Well, our brains are wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain, right? And we're surrounded by all these distractions that are designed to grab our attention.
That's so true.
It's no wonder we have trouble focusing on things that don't offer that instant dopamine hit.
Right.
Like, think about it.
Yeah.
We've got fear of failure, perfectionism, lack of motivation, and then this whole world of distractions that are all competing for our attention.
Yeah, no wonder we procrastinate.
It's a recipe for procrastination.
It really is. So we've got all these individual things,
Yeah.
but is there something more? Does procrastination turn into some kind of like a cycle?
Yeah, you're onto something there. It often does become a cycle.
Okay.
It's like this. You put off a task, right? And you feel a bit of relief, at least for a moment.
Right, that temporary relief.
Yeah. But then the stress and guilt, they start to build up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that makes the task seem even scarier. And then when you finally do it, usually last minute, the results aren't great.
Right.
And that just reinforces the idea that, this task is terrible.
And then you avoid it even more next time.
Exactly. It's a vicious cycle.
So we're stuck in this loop. Delay, stress, guilt, and it just keeps going.
Yeah, it's like digging yourself deeper into a hole.
So how do we break free? How do we climb out of that hole?
Well, that's where we move from understanding the why to figuring out the how. And the good news is there are a lot of strategies we can use to actually beat procrastination and start getting our happiness back.
Sounds good to me.
And we'll dive into those right after this quick break.
Great. Sounds good. We'll be back in just a moment.
So before we went to a break, we were talking about, all the reasons why we procrastinate and those tricky mental traps that keep us from actually getting stuff done.
Yeah, it's fascinating to unpack all of that.
Right. But knowing why we do it is only half the battle.
Exactly. We need to figure out how to actually break free.
Absolutely. Because knowledge without action, it's kind of like a car without an engine.
Oh, yeah, that's a good analogy.
It's not going to get you very far.
Right. So let's shift gears here and talk about some actual strategies for overcoming procrastination, because I, for one, am ready to trade in all that stress and guilt for some, real happiness and that sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, I think we all are.
So where do we start? What's the first step?
Well, one of the most effective and maybe surprisingly simple techniques is something called temptation bundling.
Temptation bundling. Okay, I've never heard of that.
It's a pretty cool idea.
Okay.
It's basically pairing a task you really don't like doing with something you actually enjoy.
Oh, okay.
Like, let's say you hate folding laundry,
Uh-huh, who doesn't?
but you love listening to podcasts.
Right. Guilty is charged.
So you make a rule that you'll only listen to your favorite podcast while you're folding laundry.
Oh, I get it. So you're tricking your brain into associating something you hate with something you love.
Exactly.
That's brilliant. I could definitely see that working.
That's a pretty neat trick.
But what about those bigger, more complicated tasks?
Yeah, the ones that just feel overwhelming.
Yeah, because breaking things down into smaller chunks, that's like classic advice.
Right, the age-old advice.
But does it really work?
It absolutely does, and there's a reason for that.
Okay.
When we look at a huge, intimidating task, our brains see it as a threat.
A threat.
Yeah, it triggers our stress response.
Oh, wow.
And that makes us want to avoid it altogether.
Right, because stress is uncomfortable.
Exactly, but when you break that big task down into smaller steps,
Oh.
it doesn't seem as scary anymore.
Right. Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
It becomes more approachable.
But I still feel like even when I break things down, sometimes I just can't seem to get started.
Yeah, I know that feeling.
It's like there's this invisible wall between wanting to do something and actually doing it.
Right, you have the intention but not the action.
Exactly. Any tips for getting over that hump?
Well, that's where implementation intentions come in.
Implementation intentions.
Yeah, it's kind of a mouthful.
Okay.
But it's basically about making a specific plan, and if-then plan, to pre-commit to actually taking action.
Oh, okay. So instead of just saying, I'll do it tomorrow,
Right, which is super vague.
you make a concrete plan.
Yeah, something like, if it's 9 a.m. on Tuesday, then I'm going to sit down and work on that report for 1 hour.
So you're taking the decision-making out of it.
Exactly.
No more negotiating with yourself in the morning about whether or not you feel like it.
Nope, the decision's already made.
Okay, I like that.
It's like a pre-commitment.
So we've got temptation bundling and implementation intentions.
Two powerful tools.
But what about those deeper issues? The fear of failure and perfectionism that we talked about earlier.
Right, those underlying things.
Can these techniques actually help with those?
Well, for that, you also need to focus on things like self-compassion and shifting your mindset.
Okay, so it's more about your attitude.
Yeah, it's about changing the way you think about things.
So like, how do you actually challenge those deep-seated beliefs?
Well, one technique that can be really helpful is called defensive pessimism.
Defensive pessimism, that sounds kind of counterintuitive.
I know, right? But it's about mentally preparing yourself for obstacles and setbacks.
No, interesting.
So instead of going in thinking everything will be perfect,
Which it rarely is.
right, you acknowledge that there might be challenges.
Okay, so you're basically expecting the worst.
In a way, yeah.
But how does that help?
It helps to reduce anxiety,
Oh,
and it helps you build resilience because you're not caught off guard when things don't go exactly as planned.
right, because you've already thought about it.
Exactly.
Okay, so that takes care of the fear of failure part.
Yeah, you're basically taking away its power.
But what about the perfectionism? How do you let go of that need to be flawless?
Well, that's where the idea of common humanity comes in.
Common humanity.
Yeah, it's about remembering that everyone struggles.
Oh.
Everyone makes mistakes. Nobody's perfect.
Right, we're all human.
Exactly.
So it's about shifting your perspective.
From I'm the only one who messes up to everyone goes through this, it's okay to not be perfect.
Yeah, I think we often forget that.
It's easy to get caught up in our own little world.
So recognizing that everyone's on this journey of imperfection, that can be really freeing.
Absolutely, it takes the pressure off.
Okay, so we're combining these practical techniques like temptation bundling and implementation intentions with these mindset shifts.
Right, it's a multifaceted approach.
Well, let's talk about the positive side for a minute.
The benefits of actually taking action.
Yeah, we've talked a lot about how bad procrastination is, but how does actually doing things make us happier?
Well, when we take action, even small actions, our brains release dopamine.
Dopamine, the feel-good chemical.
Exactly. It's associated with pleasure and reward.
So we're basically rewiring our brains to associate action with good feelings.
Yeah, instead of dread and avoidance.
And there's got to be more to it than just a dopamine rush, right?
Oh yeah, there are other psychological benefits too.
Like what?
Well, there's the sense of accomplishment you get from actually checking things off your to-do list.
Oh yeah, that feels good.
It boosts your self-esteem.
Right.
It makes you feel capable and effective.
And I bet that feeling makes you more motivated to tackle the next thing.
Exactly. It creates momentum.
It's like a snowball effect.
Yeah, think of it like pushing a heavy object. The hardest part is getting it moving.
Okay.
Once it's rolling, it's much easier to keep it going.
And it's less stressful.
Oh, absolutely. Remember that dark cloud of anxiety we talked about?
Yeah.
By actually doing things, you're lifting that weight off your shoulders.
So it's like cleaning up your mental clutter.
Yeah, you're creating space for peace and clarity.
I like that.
So it's not just about doing more, it's about feeling better.
Right, it's about quality of life.
Exactly.
But how does this all play out in real life?
Yeah, let's get practical.
Can you give us some examples of how people have actually overcome procrastination and, experienced those happiness benefits?
Sure, let's imagine a student who's been struggling to keep up with their studies.
Okay, I think we've all been there at some point.
Right. They feel overwhelmed by all the material they need to learn.
Yeah.
And they keep putting off studying until the last minute.
Oh, the classic all-nighter.
Exactly. So how do they break free from that pattern?
Yeah, how do they escape that cycle?
Well, they start by breaking down all that study material into smaller chunks.
Okay.
Maybe they focus on one chapter or one concept at a time.
Right, so it's less daunting.
Exactly. And then they use those implementation intentions to create a study schedule.
Okay, so they're being very specific about when they're going to study.
Yeah, they block out time in their calendar and they commit to sticking to it.
No more, I'll study later.
Nope, it's scheduled in.
Okay, but what about when those urges to procrastinate creep in?
Well, that's where temptation bundling comes in.
Right.
Maybe they only allow themselves to listen to their favorite music or podcast while they're studying.
So they're making it more enjoyable.
Exactly. Or they reward themselves with a small treat after they finish a study session.
So that's a good idea.
And most importantly, they practice self-compassion when they mess up.
Because we all slip up sometimes.
We do. It's inevitable.
So it's about getting back on track.
Not dwelling on the mistakes.
That's about progress, not perfection.
Exactly, but let's look at another example.
Okay, someone who's not a student.
Right, how about a professional who's been putting off a big project at work?
Okay, yeah, relatable.
They might start by using a project management tool.
To break down the project into smaller tasks.
Exactly.
And then they assign deadlines to each task.
Yeah, so they can visualize their progress.
So it's like creating a roadmap for the whole project.
Yeah, and they might use time blocking techniques.
To schedule specific times for working on the project.
Exactly, no distractions allowed.
So they're really taking control and being proactive.
And they can also use defensive pessimism here.
Anticipating problems before they happen.
Yeah, so they're prepared.
And they can use temptation bundling too, right?
Of course, maybe they listen to music while they work or take breaks to enjoy their favorite coffee.
And they should celebrate their successes, right?
Absolutely. Acknowledge the progress and build that positive momentum.
So we're seeing how these strategies can work in different areas of life.
Yeah, from school to work, it's all about applying the same principles.
But what about personal goals?
Yeah, the things we want to do for ourselves.
Like learning a new skill, starting a creative project, getting in shape.
Right, those things.
How do you overcome procrastination with those?
Well, I think the key is to tap into your intrinsic motivation.
Intrinsic motivation.
Yeah, it's about understanding the why behind the goal. Why is this important to you? How will achieving this goal make your life better?
So you have to connect with the purpose.
Exactly. And once you have that, you can use the same strategies we've been talking about.
Break it down, make a plan, schedule time.
Exactly. And find ways to overcome those moments of resistance.
I'm starting to see how procrastination isn't just about laziness or bad time management.
It's often a sign of something deeper.
Like we're not aligned with our actions or we're letting fear hold us back.
Exactly. It's about understanding yourself.
That's a really powerful insight.
And remember, overcoming procrastination, it's not about becoming some kind of productivity machine, right? It's about having the time and energy to focus on the things that truly matter to you.
The things that bring you joy and fulfillment.
Exactly. It's about living a better life.
This has been incredibly helpful.
Glad to hear it.
We've really unpacked the whole procrastination thing.
We've gone deep.
And I think our listeners are going to walk away with a lot to think about.
I hope so.
And hopefully they're feeling more empowered to take action.
That's the goal.
So we'll be right back after a short break to wrap things up. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been exploring how procrastination and happiness are connected. And I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty inspired to, tackle my to-do list and stop putting things off.
That's great to hear. And remember, it's not about being perfectly productive all the time.
Right.
It's more about recognizing when procrastination is getting in your way.
Yeah.
And then making a conscious choice to, act in a way that supports your goals and what you truly value.
It's funny how we often think of procrastination as like this enemy, this force that's working against us.
Right, like it's this bad thing.
But what if we looked at it differently?
Oh, interesting. How do you mean?
Like instead of seeing it as a personal failure,
Yeah.
what if we saw it as a signal,
Okay.
like a clue that something deeper might be going on?
I like that reframing.
Procrastination could be a sign of, underlying fears, or maybe we're not clear about our priorities.
Yeah, it could be that we're just not really engaged with the task at hand.
Exactly. So instead of beating ourselves up for procrastinating, we can use those moments to reflect.
Right. Step back and ask yourself some questions.
Like, okay, what's really stopping me here?
Yeah.
Is this even important to me? Do I need to change my approach?
Yeah, get curious about your procrastination instead of just judging yourself.
Because sometimes maybe procrastination is telling us that we need to reassess our goals.
It could be.
Or maybe we need to delegate some tasks or ask for help.
Yeah, you don't always have to do everything yourself.
It's not about forcing yourself to power through it.
Sometimes it's about knowing when to step back.
And I think that ties into what we were talking about before, embracing imperfection.
Absolutely.
We're all a work in progress.
Always learning and growing.
And setbacks, they're just a part of the journey.
It's all part of the process.
Overcoming procrastination isn't about being perfect all the time.
Right. It's unrealistic to think you'll never procrastinate again.
It's about being kinder to ourselves.
And creating a more sustainable way to approach our goals.
Because there will be days when we slip up.
Oh, for sure, those temptations will always be there.
But the important thing is to not let those moments completely derail us.
Don't let them throw you off track.
It's about progress, not perfection.
I like that. Progress over perfection.
And remember, even small actions, they make a difference.
They really do.
It's not about making these huge changes overnight.
Right. It's about consistency.
Those small, consistent steps, that's what leads to real change.
Like maybe you set aside 15 minutes to work on that project you've been avoiding.
Yeah. Or you finally make that phone call you've been dreading.
Each action, no matter how small, it helps to break down that procrastination wall.
And it builds that feeling of accomplishment.
And reduces stress.
And creates momentum.
Exactly. It's like a positive spiral.
You're replacing those old habits of avoidance and self-doubt with a new cycle.
A cycle of action, achievement, and confidence.
And the more we do it, the easier it gets.
It really does.
It's like working out a muscle, the muscle of action and resilience.
You start to trust yourself more.
You know you can get things done even when it's tough.
Even when you're tempted to put things off.
Well, I think we've given our listeners a lot to think about today.
We've covered a lot of ground.
They understand why procrastination happens, how it affects happiness.
And they've got some practical tools to start overcoming it.
And most importantly, I hope they're feeling more hopeful.
Yeah, that's what mattered.
That they have the power to make a change.
And to create a life that they truly love.
So to wrap things up, any final thoughts you want to leave our listeners with? Something they can take away and start using today?
I'd say think about one area in your life where procrastination has been holding you back.
Okay.
It could be anything: work, personal goals, a creative project, even something small.
Yeah, that one thing you keep putting off.
Exactly. And then ask yourself, what's one small step I can take today to break free from that cycle?
It doesn't have to be anything big.
Just a tiny step in the right direction.
Because even the smallest actions can create big changes.
And remember, it's about progress, not perfection.
It's about those consistent efforts that add up over time.
So go out there, make a plan, and start creating the life you want to live.
One step at a time.
You've got this.
And that's a wrap on another episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for joining us.
We had a great time exploring the world of procrastination and happiness.
It's been a fascinating conversation.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a new topic.
Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep taking action.
See you next time.